I'm Dick Horowitz. That's my wife Patsy. Bert is my father, and Joseph was Bert's father. Joseph was the kind of patriarch of our branch of the family. My dad had 7 brothers and sisters, total of 8, cousins too numerous to count. And we were, Patsy and I, planning a trip to Russia several years ago. What year was that? 2013, so 2 years ago. And it occurred to me that I didn't know of any of our generation, all the cousins, had ever been back to see where Joseph lived before he emigrated to the U.S. and where Bert, my dad, was actually born. He was born in 1902, and he and his sister Molly and Barney and Ida left their little village in Russia at the time, Belarus now, and went to Minsk in the middle of the night by ox cart, and took a train from Minsk to Pinsk on the seacoast, and a ship to Liverpool, England, and then another ship to Ellis Island and to the United States. Joseph had come over some years earlier, I'm not sure exactly when. Well, let me rephrase that. It wasn't.
Yes, you really should think about that.
It wasn't some years earlier, because Molly was born. Well, it could have been. Molly was born over in Russia after Joseph had left. So anyway, think of that whatever you will.
But your grandmother was pregnant, was she not?
Yes.
Yes.
That would be a requirement for this to be a genteel story.
Yes.
So Sylvia, my grandmother, was pregnant when Joseph left. Joseph came over and established himself in Brooklyn, and this of course is just background. And then Sylvia came over with the 4 kids, actually managed to find the ship manifest for the SS Carmania, which was the ship that they all came over to the U.S. on, and we found one of the pieces of information that was recorded on the manifest. They came over in steerage, of course, the 5 of them, was the total resources of their passengers, and Sylvia was listed as having 10 whole dollars. So evidently she left Uzlyany, which is where they lived in Belarus, Uzlyani, or Y.
Or Y, yeah, okay.
Or Uzlyany.
Okay.
There are lots of different spellings, lots of different transliterations. Sometimes it's simply called Uzlan. And the Belarusian folks that we heard pronounced it in a way that wasn't like any of these other ways. So it occurred to me that no one had been back to Mother Russia. It was sometimes part of Russia and sometimes part of Poland. The border moved around a lot in those days. Everybody was fighting constantly. They were always at war. So we all decided together that we would buy some airline tickets on this thing that it looked like it had been built by Wilbur and Orville themselves, and fly over to Belarus, to Minsk, after our vacation in Russia was over. and we engaged the services of a guide. This was done beforehand by our travel agent, a driver for a van and an English-speaking guide, and just for the record, our really close friends from Evansville, Dick and Kathy Merle, went with us on the Russia trip. And when we decided that we would go to Belarus as well, we asked them if they wanted to just plan to come back from the end of our trip in Russia, and they said, no, we wouldn't miss this. We're going with you to Belarus. So the four of us flew to Belarus, to Minsk from Moscow, and stayed a night in a very nice hotel in Minsk, and met up with our guide the next morning and our transportation, and away we went. Now, we had been given to believe by everyone that Uzlyany, which had been a little shtetl before the war, didn't really exist anymore. There was a German occupation in Belarus, and we were given to believe that everyone was killed and the town was leveled. But we were told that there was a marker, a historical marker that marked the center of where the town was, and that was what we thought we were going to see when we got there. But I really wanted to walk in the same soil that Bert, assuming that he did learn to walk before he went to the U.S., was walking around in his bare feet. And one other little thing, just for background about Uzlyany, is that apparently when the story was written for Fiddler on the Roof, the town that they used as a model for Anatevka, which is fictional, it was not a real town, they just made it up. The town that they used was Uzlyany. So it really, really makes you think about what things must have been like. I do want to say that our cousin Donald, who was also Barney's son, interviewed Aunt Ida, who was 9, who, when they left Uzlyany in the middle of the night in an ox cart, and she had a vivid recollection. She was very sharp mentally until she died. She had a vivid recollection of that trip by ox cart with the bad guys' horses pounding the ground on their way into town, and then leaving town in an ox cart in the middle of the night to go to Minsk. And it was mind-numbing to see that sign that on the road, finally, that we were told was the sign that said, "This is Uzlyany." And as it turned out, Uzlyany does still exist. There are, how many homes would you say?
I think about 30 or 40.
All right, so 30 or 40 homes. They're mostly owned by people, they're summer homes for people who live in Minsk, which is about 60 kilometers away. And so we pulled into town, and our guide, who was absolutely terrific, and shame on me, her name I do not remember, but there is a picture in the book, and she's the one standing on the left. Our guide suggested we take a picture of the road sign that said, "Welcome to Uzlyany." It doesn't really look like it says "Welcome to Uzlyany" to me, but
It just says Uzlyany.
yeah, okay. But considering that I don't speak Russian or Belarusian, that's not a surprise. Anyway, as we got into the village, our guide suggested that we stop at the only commercial enterprise, which was a little convenience store, something like a 7-Eleven, because she said that was the nerve center of the town. There were no other commercial enterprises of any kind in the town. There was no swimming pool, there was no gas station, there was no
Post
motel,
office.
there was no post office. There was the only building that wasn't a home was this little store.
And the homes don't have running water or electricity. They're just basic places to get out of the weather, more or less.
Yeah, what I was starting to say before, excuse me for going back in time, but these dachas, for some reason, are quite inexpensive. Typically, a dacha might be a 2 or 3 bedroom little home, small bedrooms, no indoor plumbing maybe, as Patsy just said, and they might be able to get them for the equivalent of $500. So they're almost free. I don't know why that is, but that's the way things are. Anyway, our guide went into the little convenience store and told them that my papa, that's the way she pronounced it, had been born in this village in 1902, and that we were here just looking around to see the village, see the place where Bert was born and where Joseph lived. And of course, I had no expectation that there would be anything that I could connect directly to them. And that's probably turned out to be true. You never know for sure, but
As we walked down the little gravel road, people came out of their houses watching us, because I'm sure it was a very, very unusual thing for, I don't know if they realized we were Americans, but for strangers to be walking around in their little village.
so that was odd. Not only did people come out when they saw us, but several people came out before they saw us and were waiting for us. I don't think there are any telephones there, but they have, so maybe it was jungle drums, I don't know, but everyone that we ran across seemed to have the basic idea of why we were there. And we were told by some of the people there through our translator, who was our guide, that it's not terribly unusual. Well, let me put it a different way. This is not the first time that an American has showed up looking for background, genealogical background on their family. So one of the places that we got to in town was a marker that was in the middle of what had been the Jewish cemetery in town. And
The Nazis had plowed it under, so all that was left was a marker.
Right, had plowed the cemetery under. So we were walking around, and we were told to go and see one particular house. And I should say, by the way, that we were told by someone with whom we had some conversation that there were 3 houses remaining in Uzlyany that had been there before the war. All the rest of them were razed. And so we were walking down the street to see one of those 3 houses that had been built in, I guess I got the date wrong. I thought it was 1898, but it was before then. You can see by the plaque in the picture. But this quintessential Russian babushka, an old Russian lady who was wearing a babushka, came out, and she was just so excited that we were there, and we were of course very excited that she was there. And we were excited to see what the history of the house she was living in might have been, because you never know. It could have been where Joseph lived. Who knows? So she invited us into her backyard, which was, in addition to having the waterborne facilities out there, was absolutely gorgeous. There was an arbor, a flowered arbor that we were sitting near. We were sitting on a bench in her backyard. And she and we talked and talked and talked, probably a couple of hours in total. I think maybe not quite that much, but
She was very warm, very receiving. Seemed to be thrilled that we were sitting in her backyard talking to her.
What was her name?
Zena.
her name was Zena. And we never did talk about last names, but
No, we have no idea what her last name is.
I did tell her that the folks that we were there asking about had the last name of Horowitz, because wherever they got their name from, whether it was Russian or Polish, whatever language that was, there was no H in it. There's only a G, and it was Horowitz. And if you look for Horowitzes on the internet, why would you ever do that?
The people watching this just might want to do that.
Yeah, that was meant to be sarcastic.
Right.
You will find that there are people whose last name is Horwitz and Horowitz and Horvitz and Horowitz. Some that were WICZ, all sorts of different names. All these people, even though they have different last names in our country, are very likely related, because the differences were just the differences in interpretation by the clerks at Ellis Island. We were sitting in Zena's backyard, and she related all sorts of stories about her memories having lived in Uzlyany as a young child, and then eventually growing up in Minsk.
And she's about 70 years old.
She talked about her memories of Uzlyany and told us that she had purchased the home there that we were in from some Jewish folks. She showed us the plate, the data plate, if you will, the keystone of the house, which is pictured here, that gives the date on which the house was built. So if there's no real way for me to know, other than a gut feeling, whether Bert and Joseph and Sylvia lived in that house. On the other hand, there's no one around who can tell me they didn't. And so that's my assumption, just because I want that to be my assumption. If it wasn't that house, it was one close to it, because the whole village is very, very small. So she talked a little bit about her current life and the fact that she lived in Minsk, and she talked, we had a conversation about, the point of it for me was to try to determine whether there was any evidence, direct evidence, that the Horowitzes had lived in this particular house. And she volunteered to do a little bit of research. We never saw the product of that research, so my assumption is that it was not productive. But she did show us the data plate, which is in the picture, and she told us absolutely that she was absolutely certain that the house had been owned by Jewish folks for a very long time. Now, she couldn't say whether it was originally built by Jewish folks, but there's a really, really good chance that it was, because the overwhelming proportion of the population at that time was Jewish. It was a very profound experience talking to Zena and feeling the emotion that she had, feeling the warmth that she had for us. we hugged goodbye, you would have thought we were long-lost cousins who had been related to each other for 50 years. It was a terrific experience. I want to say, in terms of that being because of our family heritage, I'm sure part of it was that, but it was on its own a very profound experience. In fact, in talking later with our friends from Evansville who were sitting there with us in Zena's backyard, we had been to see palaces, we had seen innumerable tons of gold and art.
In Russia.
In Russia, old artifacts, wonderful things, so impressive. And their opinion was that by a factor of a few thousand, the visit to Uzlyany was more important to them than all the rest of it.
It turned out to be the highlight of the trip.
Just if you can, tell me what impact this visit to Uzlyany had on you, Dick.
The specific impact that it had was that, not that I thought about it every day, but there was some sort of a hole in me, in my thinking, because I knew so many people who had sprung like a well out of this place that was far, far away. And I didn't know if it still existed. I had never seen it. I didn't have any idea what it was like. And standing on that ground with my own 2 feet was an experience that was at once profound. It was really mind-numbing in how important it was and how close it made me feel to Bert.
I think it formed a connection between the old motherland Horowitz beginning and the new Horowitzes of the United States.
That's a very good way of putting it. And as I was standing there, I thought that one of the greatest pleasures I would have in my life was sharing this with all my cousins, which happened at the reunion in Atlanta a short time ago, and we are recording through Gary's grace. We're recording for posterity here. So I can't really find the words to describe what a positive effect this had on me. And I want to say, and I'm hoping that you don't call the cops on me and get me arrested, I stole part of Uzlyany and brought it home with me as we were standing in the parking lot of the convenience store. I took a rock and put it in my pocket, and so I have a piece of Uzlyany in the United States.
Right, and now we all have a piece of Uzlyany,
yes,
because of what you've been able to tell us today. So, okay, Dick and Patsy Horowitz, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.